Hey all, so back with another Spotlight with Context, and today we are looking at Silver Sable, the newest mercenary in the skill class. Touching on base stats, as we always do, to take a look at prestige, hers is quite high. I think out of the 7-star pool, it's top 15, top 20. I didn't do the exact breakdown given that Aunt May's a little bit out of date, but she is, I think, the third highest in the skill class, or maybe yeah, she's in the top 3 in the skill class. That I'm sure of. So if you like her, she definitely is a good investment for that. Moving on to the attributes, survivability of 3 here. There's not really anything in her kit that explicitly helps her resist damage, but she does have access to a fair amount of defensive ability accuracy reduction, which is a pretty good way to turn off a lot of kits. So I think that's just kind of representing all of those threats she doesn't have to interact with. Damage 4, this is kind of the purpose of the kit, especially as she gets going. You can do a lot of burst damage, a lot of critical shocks. Ease of use 2, this is the flip side though. While Sable has a very cool and fun and incredibly unique playstyle, it is a little bit tricky to pull off if you are not used to, really keeping the opponent in the corner and potentially with intercepting them as well. And so there's a significant learning curve here. Utility of 3, we already mentioned the defensive ability accuracy reduction. That is most of this rating. Silver Sable also is a pretty effective miss counter, which is a lot of the rest. And then Defender 2.5, pretty much the only defensive ability she has is the ability to place those mines, which can shock you, but she does have that, so you do have to watch for it. So moving on to the strengths, first and most notable one is of course her Sable Mines. We talked about this earlier, this is part of her unique gameplay. She places them on the ground, and then she wants both her and her opponent to pass over them. She gets stronger, they take damage. We mentioned earlier that it is in the form of shocks, but she also punishes immunity to shock. So you're going to watch out for that as well. Now that said, shock damage is still one of her strengths because she would prefer her damage be in the form of shocks and eventually in the form of critical shocks through her special 2. She also has access to very powerful disorients, especially against science defenders. While she has ways around shock immunity, I personally see that more as like a way to hit thing and as a defensive threat, right? Because you can't just bring shock immunity and ignore her mines. They will still be a threat, but on offense you want to convert your basic shocks into critical shocks, and that means you don't want to fight someone who's shock immune. Additionally, unstoppable or unblockable are a bit of a problem. Unstoppable more than unblockable. Evade is also going to be a bit tricky because, like I said, you want to keep the opponent in the corner. And so similar to some other characters that are tempo focused, like Kashala comes to mind, those disruptions that keep you out of the corner can be a bit of a problem. And then Sable does have the ability to purify non-damaging debuffs, but she also has almost no way to avoid it. It's kind of automatic to the rest of her loop, so if you're facing somebody who punishes Purify, it's gonna hurt. Starting on the actual abilities themselves, light and medium attacks have a 40% chance to inflict a shock debuff, not a particularly strong one, good 20 seconds so you can hold on to it, and these cap out at 30 stacks. Her heavy attacks cannot miss any of the hits in them, so you can just parry heavy against Photon. That is, of course, the most obvious use of this. And the last hit inflicts a disorient passive for 20 seconds. Passive so you don't have to worry about it being removed on right back at it. And against Science Champions, these disorients are 50% instead of 35%. They stack up to 2. So that means that you have access to 70% total defensive ability accuracy reduction against everyone and 100% against science. And then we've already talked about this, when a personal shock effect fails to trigger due to immunity specifically, you deal a burst of energy damage. So it's still energy. Somebody with heavy energy resist is going to slow her way down, but it is a bit of an answer to immunity. Now, Sable Mines, we'll see how to place these later, but this is kind of the core of her kit. If the opponent moves onto a Sable Mine, it triggers, inflicting an instant shock, and then the mine goes on cooldown for 6 seconds. While it's on cooldown, you don't get that instant shock for traveling over it, right? Now, mines are not triggered during the opponent's special attacks. This becomes very important against a defending Sable because that's your window to safely travel over them. But you'll see when you're using Sable on offense, this is actually very much in her favor because of the next bullet point here. Sable Mine cooldowns are removed when you perform an intercept or punish a special attack. So the way this tends to work out is that your opponent will not trigger the mines while traveling over them with a special attack, but then you'll punish that special attack, remove the cooldowns, and be able to push them right back over. Additionally, as an attacker, if Silver Sable passes over a mine, then she gets a 2% Fervor passive for 20 seconds and purifies 1 non-damaging debuff. So this Purify can be pretty powerful if you have multiple mines stacked up, but the main thing you're looking for here is that Fervor passive because, reminder, Fervor increases the ability accuracy of damaging debuffs, and so this is going to make you better able to stack up those shocks with your lights and mediums. Lastly, knocking Silver Sable into or over a mine with a heavy or special 1 or 2 removes the mine without triggering it. Obviously, you hope this never comes up when you are attacking with Sable, but against a defending Sable, this is going to be a very important thing to look out for, your opportunities to defuse these threats. So special 1, this is the ramp, right? On the final hit, set a Sable Mine in front of the opponent that arms after 2 seconds and lasts until the next Sable Mine is set. But that doesn't mean that the mine is lost the next time you throw the special 2, because each subsequent special 1 sets an additional mine. So what that really means is that the mine disappears, in quotes, when the next special 1 is set, so that you can then have 2 mines next to each other. It just resets the position. This means that you can throw your first special 1 in the middle of the map, and then your second special 1 somewhere else. The 2 mines will be right next to each other. Ideally, by the time you throw your third special 1, you have them in the corner, and the 3 mines are all nice in a neat little row in front of the defender, so both of y'all can go back and forth over them a bunch. Backdraft gameplay is very important to her. You want to get these lines in a row. You want to push your opponent over them with a combo, but not finish the combo, dash back, let them dash over the mines. You intercept them, resetting the cooldowns. You push them back over with the combo, triggering all of those instant shocks. They come back out. You rinse and repeat until you push them over a bar. Then they throw their special, travel over the mines without triggering them. You punish the special, put that on cooldown again, and you just keep going, right? At that point, you're going to aim for your special 2, for reasons we'll get to later. So as a defender, it's important to note that the Sable Mine spawns at Sable's location, arms immediately, but only ever stacks to 1. You don't have to worry about 3 mines in a row for a defending Sable. You just have to try and remove the 1 she will place. And then on the final hit, you get 20 seconds of tracking. Reminder that this just bypasses miss. And so that is going to let her tear into all of those science defenders that rely on miss. Reminder that the heavies themselves can't miss ever. And so against someone like Photon, where miss is a very high uptime threat, you could parry heavy your way to the special 1, and then as long as the miss is down for that, you throw it, you apply the tracking, and now you can fight with impunity. Moving on to the special 2. The first hit gives you a very large cruelty buff for 20 seconds, which you care about quite a bit, both because yellow numbers are fun and because of this second part, right? If the opponent is knocked into a Sable Mine via the Special 2, then you convert up to 10 Personal Shock debuffs into that many Critical Shock passives. So you get the increase in their potency based on her critical damage multiplier, which this giant cruelty buff just boosted all that much, right? Additionally, this conversion is 10 per mine. So if the Special 2 knocks the opponent through 3 mines, then you can get up to 30 of these critical shocks. On to the Special 3, this refreshes all personal buffs, debuffs, and passives, and pauses them for 20 seconds. So while you often won't necessarily try and go here, once you have a bunch of critical shock passives, if you can get to the Special 3 before they fall off, then you can lock in a whole bunch of damage by just freezing them for a bit. You also get a burst of energy damage and more for all of the mines you have. On to the signature ability, activating a special attack grants a cruelty buff for each shock effect on the opponent, up to 10. And light and medium attacks have extra ability accuracy for your shocks when you are intercepting the opponent. So this plays into what we talked about earlier. You're going to line up your mines, ideally in the corner. You're going to backdraft your opponent, stacking shocks on them and fervors on yourself until you get to your Special 2. You're probably going to have cruelties along the way because of the Special 1s you threw, so your basic attacks are going to deal larger yellow numbers when you crit. And then the Special 2 itself is going to get these cruelties from the SIG as well as the giant one just from itself. And then you're going to convert a bunch of shock debuffs into critical shock passives and let them cook. That is the basic Sable recipe. Special 1 for mines, backdraft, Special 2 for conversion. Moving on to our synergies here, we have Outlaws with Sandman and Prowler. While Prowler's Personal Pursuit passive is active, causing Evade to fail grants him a non-stacking Fury buff for 20 seconds, and this is a 50% Fury. So that will, be additive with Prowler's personal Furies, so it's not necessarily a 50% damage boost, but it's still a 50% Fury, right? You will feel this. And then for Sandman, while both unstable and performing a heavy attack, personal debuffs are paused. So this is only while you're in the heavy animation, but it's any part of the heavy animation, charge, release, whatever, and basically just means that while you are cashing out for your damage in the unstable state, you have a bit better uptime on your utility. Whether you are going for the petrifies or for the decelerates, they will just fall off that much more slowly. Sable herself increases the duration of personal disorient effects by 5 seconds, so you have to throw your heavies a bit less often. Frenemies with OG Spider-Man. Spider-Man at 5 or more webbing inflicts an indefinite shock debuff. And so this is pretty strong, right? It's a fair amount of attack per second, and it just sits there and cooks the opponent as long as you stay above 5 webbing. Now, Spider-Man's normal damage output is via physical vulnerability on the Special 2 stun, and this isn't physical damage, right? Shock is energy damage, so most of the time this won't necessarily be worth chasing, but if you're facing somebody where you can't land your stuns, or you otherwise have problems with that physical damage payout, then getting this shock up and maintaining it by throwing Special 1s becomes an alternate damage route. And then for Sable herself, the cooldown on her mines goes down by 2 seconds. This doesn't really matter when you are playing her ideally because of the backdrafts, but if things are a bit more complicated, it's going to mean that you are less punished for not being able to always hit those intercepts. And then we have 3 generic synergies with some of the other defenders, and then Spider-Man, Deadpool, Green Goblin, Captain America. Basic stuff you'll find on the lower rarities. And that's pretty much Sable. Just to talk about it, she has a really unique gameplay style with her mines and with really caring about how you are going over them, both you and her. It's an evolution of some of the trap gameplay that we've seen on other characters, and I find it very fun. If you mix in her disorients, which again can cap out at 100% against science defenders, Then you have some pretty solid utility as well, and a very proficient miss counter, and so she has some real value. So I encourage you to try her out, and until next time, thanks so much for watching, and take care.